Welcome into STB Sports Take, simply the best sports podcast. I'm your host, Sean Bingham. Thank you for joining us. We are on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everywhere you get your podcasts, we are there. Please hit the subscribe button, the follow button. Find us also on social media, Instagram, TikTok, everywhere. We're out there, STB Sports Take. Please find and follow and share. You know the drill. Great show for you today. It's the day after Christmas. Merry Christmas to all of you. Happy New Year upcoming. Great show for you today because there is big news that is sending ripples throughout the state of Utah and throughout the state of Michigan and throughout the entire world of college football. And that is that Kyle Whittingham, who recently stepped down at Utah, is going to Michigan now, a 5-year deal at Michigan to be the head coach of one of the bluest of blue blood schools in all of college football. Now, there's a couple things I got to say here. We're going to have Sean O'Connell joining us here shortly. He's a very prominent media voice for the University of Utah and really for Utah sports in general. He'll be joining us shortly, but before we go there, I got to say this. I called this from 2 weeks ago. The moment Kyle Whittingham stepped down, I said, no. This is not him stepping down. This is him getting subtly forced out, and the timing of it right after Sharon Moore at Michigan is arrested, and that whole fiasco happened, and obviously he's fired. It was the next day Kyle Whittingham steps down. I think he finally gave in to the forceful retirement they were kind of pushing him into because he thought, you know what, I'm going to go after this Michigan job. This might be a revenge tour for all we know. So Kyle Whittingham is the real deal. The guy can absolutely positively coach. He's the winningest coach in the history of University of Utah. He took that program. Urban Meyer laid the real groundwork to kind of get it going to that next level. But Kyle Whittingham took it and really ran with it. Multiple Pac-12 championships, an undefeated season in 2008, a win over Nick Saban and Alabama in the Sugar Bowl, known widely for taking 3-star recruits and turning them into 4- and 5-star type players. So imagine what he can do at Michigan with that much money in that big of a conference, where honestly, a lot of the times the recruits just come to you. In the world of dating, it's like being the hot chick who just has to sift through her Instagram DMs and kind of decide which of these guys make the cut to maybe get a reply or even a date. That's what recruiting's got to be like at Michigan compared to Utah. But I called this weeks ago. The moment he retired, the moment he stepped down, I said, this is not a retirement. There's no way. He would have made it clear he's retiring. He's not going to go be some admin guy. Several Utah Ute fans in the comments and elsewhere were telling me I was crazy, I was a hater, I was a joke. The joke is actually on you. I knew that Kyle Whittingham was not done, and I knew that he was aiming specifically for Michigan. The timing of it was just too coincidental. I think he'd been trying to stay at Utah for one more year, maybe even more, and the negotiations and the talks were not going like he wanted, and the writing was on the wall. He was going to have to step down or it was going to get really ugly and weird, and the second that Sharon Moore and Michigan had to part ways for obvious reasons, Kyle Whittingham jumped at the opportunity, made it very clear early on that he was extremely interested in the job. It took Michigan a while to come around, so we don't know if he was the second, third, fourth pick. We know he wasn't the first because that was Dillingham out of Arizona State. He didn't want to go. He stayed in Tempe, and now he's begging people to stroke a check for $20 million, one of the weirdest press conferences I've ever seen. But that happened, and then they moved on to Whittingham. Allegedly, he's the second choice. We don't really know for sure. But I will say this. I think Whittingham absolutely has some gas left in the tank. I think he's got something to prove now, a little chip on his shoulder, because I do believe that he was forcefully removed from Utah. And you just don't do that to a legend like Kyle Whittingham. So I think there's going to be a little chip on his shoulder. I think he's going to have way more ammo than he's ever had before from a monetary standpoint, a booster backing standpoint, a reputation and tradition and just conference, just everything going for him at Michigan that he hasn't had at Utah ever before. And I think you're going to see how good of a coach he really is. And I wish him nothing but the best. So with that, we're going to bring in Sean O'Connell. Sean O'Connell is a longtime sports radio host and play-by-play broadcaster, currently hosting the Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700 and serving as the lead fight commentator for the Professional Fighters League on ESPN. A 16-year sports media veteran in Salt Lake City with stops in San Francisco and SiriusXM. He's hosted national shows, including the Pac-12 Today, alongside NFL veteran Jeff Schwartz. Before the mic, Sean was a professional MMA fighter, earning multiple Fight of the Night bonuses in the UFC and winning the PFL's inaugural light heavyweight championship in 2018, a $1 million title he capped by retiring on the spot. He became the first MMA champion to immediately transition into lead play-by-play and has been the voice of the PFL ever since. Known for his heavy hands, 12 of his 21 career wins came by knockout. Off the air, he's a columnist for KSL Sports, an avid traveler and foodie, and the author of 2 books on Amazon that you can find. And I should also mention he played football at the University of Utah. So without further ado, we bring in the one, the only, Sean O'Connell. Sean, thank you for joining us. I know it's the day after Christmas. You're a busy man. We've got all the holiday stuff going on, but this is a big day in the state of Utah and in all of college football.
Yeah, it's a huge day, especially for football, college football in our great state, and I appreciate you having me on.
No, dude, it's actually an honor. If this goes well, I'd love to have you on more often. I'm sure it'll go well for me. I just hope it goes well for you.
I'm sure it'll be great.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you just immediately. You know, you played at the University of Utah. Obviously, you're more of an MMA fighter, but you did play football. You have a lot of college football background yourself. What does Kyle Whittingham, and you've been covering Utah for years, what does Kyle Whittingham mean to the state of Utah and specifically to the University of Utah?
Well, I mean, Utah football is Kyle Whittingham, and Kyle Whittingham is Utah football. The program would not be where it is now if he weren't the head coach that helped them navigate through the transition into the Pac-12 conference and then to the Big 12 conference. If he had not been the guy hired to take over after a very successful but brief run under Urban Meyer, then everything would have been different. And obviously, he preceded Urban Meyer in terms of being on the staff. He was here a lot longer than that. He was an assistant under Ron McBride, so he was a part of that kind of foundation being laid for the house that he would end up building. He's just, I mean, he is Utah football, and you can get people being like overly dramatic about things like that, but 21 years of his fingerprints being all over this program and all over the state in terms of recruiting. And, he's coaching the children of guys that initially played for him now. It's wild. Multi-generations of football players in this state have been affected by Kyle Whittingham one way or another.
Yeah, it's actually absolutely amazing. Now, like Kyle Whittingham, I went to BYU, so had to throw that in there. No, but I would say he is kind of the Lavelle Edwards of Utah football. Would you agree with that, or is that taking it too far?
No, I mean, I think that it's probably not in complete apples to apples comparison, but I think Kyle would be flattered by that comparison.
Yeah.
And he's the closest thing that Utah's got to Lavelle, right? I don't know that they're going to end up naming the stadium after him like they did down at BYU, but
Yeah.
I mean, especially in a modern era of college football, and you know this just as well as I do, longevity is so hard to achieve and so hard to come by, either from the coach's personal standpoint or the university can't keep a guy who's as successful and as decorated as Kyle Whittingham around. And it was a perfect marriage until it wasn't. And now Michigan benefits from that.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you about that. So when he first stepped down about 2 weeks ago or so now, I did a little, and I don't have any insider information. You do. I have my logical thinking, my gut instinct, things like that. And I did a little podcast about how I felt like he was kind of indirectly forced out. It sounds like maybe it might have been even worse than that. I don't know. We'll let you respond. But I felt like he was at the very least indirectly forced out just by the nature of them saying, Morgan Scalley is the head coach in waiting. You're kind of telling him right then and there, like, hey, like, we're ready when you are. We're ready to move on when you are. And then the fact that he stepped down the day after Sharon Moore had his whole fiasco at Michigan and has to leave. Obviously, he gets arrested and that whole thing blows up. And then the next day, Whittingham's all of a sudden is like, okay, I stepped down. But he didn't say he was retiring. So I went on and said, look, he's clearly wanting to still coach. He's going to still coach. I think he's eyeing Michigan. Maybe that was just a lucky guess, but tell me what you know from the inside, as much as you can anyway. How accurate was that? What really happened? Was he forced out? Was this something that Harlan is behind? Morgan Scalley saying, look, I'm going to go elsewhere if you don't make me head coach now. Like, what happened?
Well, we will get the full, clear details on that now that it is a national story rather than just, a local story here in Utah.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm pretty well connected. I feel like I have good sources. I got some conflicting information, but going back, I mean, before this season even began, I had Kyle Whittingham on my radio show, and I said, hey, a lot of us have been thinking maybe last year was going to be your last year, maybe one of the Rose Bowl years you were going to hang it up, and he openly admitted, I couldn't go out on the note of the 2024 season. He said, I'm too competitive. I couldn't go out on that bad note. So gave everyone the impression that, like, he came back for one last ride trying to kind of right the ship, trying to
Yep.
redeem himself and the program.
Yeah.
And obviously this season was a successful effort in doing so. I'm sure he would have liked to have won a Big 12 championship. He would have liked to beat BYU and go out with a win over the rival, all those types of things. But a
Yep.
10-win season is nothing to laugh at, right?
No.
So, I mean, I was saying every single week, dang near every day on my radio show, Kyle Whittingham is done at Utah. He's going to retire. He's going to ride off into the sunset on a really solid season. And I fully believe that. I was
Yeah.
looking around the crowd at the Kansas State game, Utah's last home game, and there were family members from the Whittingham clan that don't typically show up for every single home game, and they were there. And
Interesting.
members of the family had said, "Hey, we're showing up tonight because this is Kyle's last ride." And
Yeah.
then, I talked to people that were on the road trip to Kansas, and kind of the same thing, that like a bunch of people who don't always go to road games were at that road game. So it seemed like Kyle Whittingham was sending the message internally, even to his own family. They're like, "Hey, this is the last ride. We're going to finish it out here."
Yeah.
And I think what happened was he got the announcement that private equity money was going to help narrow the spending gap for Utah with Texas Tech, BYU, Oregon, USC, Michigan, the powers in college football.
Yep.
And he probably was like, "Huh, that's interesting. What could I do with something like that?"
Yeah.
And as you know, there was a recruiting class signed also. Two highest rated recruits in the history of Utah football
Yeah.
signed with this class. And I think maybe he was like, "Huh, what could I do with guys like that? Maybe I'm getting in too big of a rush here." I think he legitimately flipped and changed his mind, and I don't think that was well received. And people on the Hill that were invested, either literally invested with being boosters, or people who had kind of prepared a succession plan or were that succession plan, were like, "Hey, you can't keep waffling on us here. We would rather go ahead and turn the page." And when he heard that, I think he was, "All right, fine. I'm gone then, but I'm not done coaching." And a lot of people didn't like me talking about that, you talking about that, anyone talking about that. A lot of Utah fans were like, "No, no, no, no. He is Utah football. He's not going anywhere else."
Yeah.
But Kyle Whittingham showed us today he ain't done.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, I'm obviously a BYU guy. I'm very open about that. But I got nothing but respect for Whittingham. The guy's an absolute stud. He's the type of guy that you want to follow. He just seems to lead from the front, and I think he's going to do fantastic at Michigan. I made a little joke before you came on and joined us here that the recruiting at Michigan's got to be similar to, like, if you're the hot chick, you're just like fielding DMs on Instagram. You don't really have to like go out and find the guys. They just find you. It feels like at Michigan, the recruits are like that. The tradition is so big. The conference is so big. The money is so massive. It just feels like recruiting is going to be significantly easier for him. Do you think that was a big appeal, or is it something about, he mentioned a while back that he felt like college football was trending towards a two-conference type of thing, which I think it clearly is. Do you think that this is, I don't know, is there anything to that? Or if it hadn't been Michigan, would he have gone elsewhere, or was it just because he got something as big as Michigan?
Yeah, I don't think, like, if that Michigan job doesn't open up, and the what other jobs are out there
Yeah.
this late in the cycle, I don't think Kyle Whittingham is in college football this year. Maybe he's doing like some work for the Kansas City Chiefs and his buddy Andy Reid,
Yeah.
something like that, and working with his son on that staff. I don't know what he would be doing, but the option presenting itself, even if at the time it was kind of far fetched, and Michigan was chasing down Dillingham and Jed
Yeah.
Fish and younger guys. I think that Kyle Whittingham and his agent did a good job here. Obviously, we're like, well, if this is a possibility, let's at least throw our name in the hat. And why wouldn't you? Like,
Yeah.
you made all the correct points, right? If you're able to do what you did at Utah, that doesn't have the same kind of support, national footprint, money, you should be able to do even better things with the greater resources at Michigan. And we've asked the question for years as Utah, insiders, fans, whatever. man, what could Kyle Whittingham do if he had the notoriety of a USC or an Oregon or a
Yeah.
Washington? When you're in the Pac-12 and you're beating those teams, you got to a point where he's beating those teams regularly.
Yeah.
It's like, what could he do if he had your money, your
Yeah.
boosters? And then we got to this NIL era, and we had to start asking that question about, well, what could Kyle Whittingham do if he had Texas Tech money? What could Kyle
Right.
Whittingham do if he had BYU money? And he doesn't have to ask those questions anymore. It's not something for us to wonder. We're now going to get to see. And
Yeah.
if he's as good of a coach as I think he is and you think he is, he'll be competing not only for a college football playoff spot, he should be in that very soon. If he's got a 5-year deal and he coaches the whole 5-year deal, I fully expect Kyle Whittingham with those resources to be competing for a national championship, to at least play in a national championship game.
Yeah, no, I agree. So I want to ask you this: a couple things you mentioned there. One was his age. What is he? 67 or what? How old is he?
66. He's 66 years old.
Okay, so he's 66. So you've been around football your whole life. You've covered the sport forever. How much of a difference does that really make? I mean, I can understand Michigan wanting to find a guy that's going to be there for 20 years, and that's probably not going to be Whittingham. But does he still have it right now? I know it's hard to say no, but does he? I mean, there's a reason they went after these younger guys. What are your thoughts on his age, I guess?
Look, I think that his age matters a lot less than most 66-year-olds.
Yeah,
Kyle Whittingham is in better shape than you and I are.
Yeah,
He works out more than we do. He is more disciplined. He is a harder worker than most guys 30 years younger than him. So
Yep.
I think him being 66 is not the same thing as, like, my mom is 66. It's not the same thing.
Yeah.
He is a football junkie. He is dedicated to the craft. And I think that was one of the reasons why he changed his mind in the 11th hour, because he realized, look, man, retirement is always going to be there. It's always going to be an option. The beach in Hawaii is always going to be there. The golf courses are always going to be there. My grandkids are always going to love me, and I can hang out with them whenever I want. But you have a very limited window as a human being to compete at the highest level of anything. And he's been fortunate enough to extend that window for now 2.5 decades.
Yeah.
But even that is not long enough for someone as competitive as Kyle Whittingham. So does his age matter when it comes to relating to recruits and things like that? Potentially, yes. But he's also a smart enough guy to be like, all right, if that particular kid from that particular family needs to hear from a 30 or a 35-year-old or a 40-year-old instead of a 66-year-old, I'll send an assistant coach to close that deal.
Totally. Yeah. No, and that's another thing I wanted to ask you about, was just, you kind of already touched on it there, but I agree that he's in phenomenal shape. But what about, like, not just recruiting, but maybe as the game changes quite a bit, is it are there things, is the game changed enough to where maybe it's passed him by in certain aspects? I think people felt that way about Bill Belichick as he got older with the Patriots. It was like his style just doesn't work anymore. Do you feel like there's anything there at all with Kyle Whittingham?
Well, no, I don't think there's anything there. Kyle Whittingham's 2 bad years in recent history at Utah were mostly because of devastating injuries.
Yeah.
And now there are some people who say, well, yeah, he's in control of that. He was practicing things too hard, or he was working them out too much during the season, whatever. I'll listen to those discussions, but no one was ever going to be able to prove one way or another whether it was a Kyle Whittingham practice that caused that much bad luck on those teams. And I think this year, if he would have had another 5-win season or even an 8-win season after what happened last year, I probably would be further on that side of the argument. Yeah. But he made the tough call to fire the offensive coordinator that had been not only his best offensive coordinator, but a close friend of his and a guy that helped him achieve the highest success that he ever had as a coach. Andy Ludwig was there for the Sugar Bowl. He was also there for the Pac-12 championship years. Yeah. And Kyle Whittingham made the choice to get rid of that guy. If the game had passed him by, he would have made the wrong hire in bringing in the next one. He would not. He would have been, he'd gone the 3 yards in a cloud of dust type individual and been ball control, play great defense kind of thing, which is what people somewhat unfairly say his reputation is. Well, instead he hired Jason Beck, who had one of the best offensive years of any assistant
Yeah.
coach and any coach on any staff in all of college football. And he did it, Sean, at Utah, which is typically like a top 20 offense, top 70, or excuse me, top 20 defense, top 70 offense.
Yeah.
This year, they're a top 20 offense. I
Yeah.
mean,
I think
the
number
game has
2
not
rushing.
passed him by.
The rushing game was insane this year at Utah.
Second best rushing attack in the country,
Yeah.
and the only Power 4 team in that top 5.
Yep. So do you think he takes? I mean, who's he going to take with him? Is he taking Beck with him to Michigan? I mean, if I'm thinking, I'm sitting here thinking, as a BYU guy, like, what's going to stop Jay Hill from going with him? I mean, is he going? How much of it is he going to gut Utah and or BYU with him as he leaves to go to Michigan?
Well, look, your job now, if you're Kyle Whittingham, is not to make sure that the Utah fans that cheered for you for 21 years still like you. You're not. You don't have to care about your own alma mater, BYU, from 100 years ago, right? Your job is to beat Ohio State and to win a Big Ten championship and to compete for a national championship. And if you think that Jay Hill can help you in that effort, you go and you give Jay Hill the $2.5 million that Michigan coordinators get paid. And if you think that Jason Beck is the dude that helped you redeem the terrible season you had last year at Utah, which he is, obviously, you say, you got no loyalty to Utah. You were there for one season, and you're a BYU guy. Wear blue again, come to Michigan. I mean, I think it would be insane if he didn't take Jason Beck. The Jay Hill conversation is more interesting to me because Wink Martindale's there. He's a really great coach. He's got guys like Gary Anderson that are part of his tree. He's got guys that are on the Utah staff right now, like Colton Swan, who's ready to coordinate a defense. Those types of individuals would also be good candidates at Michigan, but Jay Hill, I think, would be the best of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, as a BYU fan, I agree with you. And then I sit here and think, gosh, what's stopping him? I mean, Kalani obviously got recruited heavily, by Penn State. They tried to lure him over there with as much money as they could. And in the end, BYU is a very unique job. You either love it or you hate it. You either fit for it or you don't. And Kalani just wanted to stay at BYU. But I think about these other guys, and I'm like, man, like if you're just trying to be among the best. I mean, Michigan is one of the bluest of blue bloods in all of college football. If not number one, it's for sure top 4. And I mean, I'd put it up there with Ohio State, Alabama, Texas, LSU, Michigan. Like those are the top 5 in my personal opinion in the whole country. So what's stopping guys from going there? And then what's stopping recruits from going there? I mean, how many recruits might he take? Or is he going to take any of these? You mentioned the 2 biggest recruits in the history of the Utah program. Are those guys going to stay at Utah? Are they going to go with him now to Michigan? Like, what do you think will happen there?
Well, I mean, that's I think going to be somewhat dependent on which assistant coaches he takes with him. Jim Harding was the one who got Kelvin Obot, the big offensive lineman. And if Jim Harding's going to Michigan, maybe Kelvin wants to go to Michigan. Well, let's say that Utah, to replace Jim Harding, hires Jordan Gross, former All-American, first-round draft pick from the University of Utah. Kelvin Obot's high school coach is definitely ready to coach a college offensive line. Maybe Morgan Scalley can convince him to come and replace Jim Harding if Jim does leave. Or does Morgan say, hey, Jason Beck's going with Witt. Harding, I'd like you to be my offensive coordinator, and maybe Harding stays. Maybe Kelvin Obot doesn't love Harding that much. I mean, we don't know the ins and outs of all this stuff, but I think that certainly matters. The second highest rated recruit in program history is a legacy, right? His dad, Ben Moa, played at the University of Utah. He's a dual threat athlete. He could be an offensive player, could be a defensive player. So maybe he stays. But again, like if Kyle Whittingham really wants him and doesn't care about like undermining Morgan Scalley's recruiting class, which why would he? Why doesn't he just tell the Michigan boosters, hey, Dave Portnoy, I really want this Moa kid at Michigan, crack him off an extra $500,000 and he's coming.
Yeah. Yeah, it's refreshing to hear you say that because I've got quite a few Utah people in my mentions and texts and everything saying, oh, no, Whittingham, he stepped down because he wants the best for Utah. And I was like, I just don't buy that. I know you're going to think I'm biased as a BYU guy, but like, I just don't buy that this is all for the good of Utah. Like, if it was for the good of Utah, he'd be retiring. So we're going to find out real quickly how much it's for the good of Utah because I think he will take people with him that will be detrimental to Utah and likely to BYU as well. What about recruiting in general in the state of Utah? I mean, most guys here, aren't to the level of recruits that he can get at Michigan anyway. But what kind of impact do you think this might have over the next few years with recruiting here in the state of Utah?
Well, I mean, it already happened when Urban Meyer went from Utah to Florida.
Yeah.
He was like, man, turns out those big Polynesian defensive linemen that I had at Utah are just as good as anyone down here in the SEC. And he made sure every one of his teams had a couple of those guys, even when he went to Ohio State, right?
Yep.
And he was recruiting Southern California more than Ohio State ever had previously. So
Yeah.
Kyle Whittingham is going to do the same thing. He's going to, I mean, will he be excited that he can now go into Central Ohio and he can go into Michigan and he can recruit the good players there, the DMV area? Of course. You were never getting those guys to come to the University of Utah, and now he can get them in Michigan. But it's not like he's just going to abandon the idea that if a Panay Sewell is coming up at Orem High or at Pineview High or wherever, he's absolutely going to recruit those guys. And now he's going to have more money to offer them in NIL. He's going to be able to sit down in the living room and he's going to say, not only do I, as a head coach, have a great track record of developing NFL players, but look how many Michigan Wolverines there are in the NFL right now.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're a coach locally here, this is the worst case scenario that you have to compete with Kyle Whittingham on
Yeah.
your same recruiting trail, but he's got Michigan money.
I know. I know it's wild. I was talking to our mutual friend Alan about it, and we were just like, dude, this is just kind of like a little wake up call about just how big this is when you have to, as a Utah or BYU fan, admit the massive gap that does exist between like the Big 12 and the Big 10. It's not even close. So, I mean, would you agree with that, or am I off in that a
Oh,
little bit?
you're absolutely right. And look no further than, I mean, I've paid attention to your last several podcasts, the last several weeks of podcasts.
Yeah.
You were the only reason you felt a need to go and campaign for a BYU team, a 10-win BYU team,
11.
sorry, an 11-win BYU team to try to get into that college football playoff is because you have to do that when you're a Big 12 runner-up.
Yep.
Is there a world that exists in which Kyle Whittingham at Michigan as a Big 10 runner-up with 10 or 11 wins is not in the college football playoff?
No, I mean we just watched. They're the 1 and 2 seed. It's like it doesn't even matter.
Alabama is a 3-loss team, and they're in there because they're part of the SEC.
Yep.
You're absolutely right.
And
This
they also
is
got smoked in their conference championship game, by the way. But
they got embarrassed.
yeah,
They you could easily make a case if everyone considered the Big 12 equal to the SEC or to the Big 10, you could very easily make a case that BYU belonged in over Alabama.
yeah,
But because that's not the world that we live in, Alabama gets in. BYU, in one of the best seasons they've ever had,
yeah. Top
does not
5
get
season in
invited to the
history,
party.
yeah.
And by the way, the same thing would have happened to Utah if Utah had won the rivalry game. The same thing would have happened to Texas Tech if Texas Tech had had a slightly worse year and been the runner-up in the conference instead of the champion in the conference.
Yeah.
I mean, the committee delivered the message to everyone loud and clear.
Yeah.
This is an invitational for who we think belongs.
Yeah.
And congratulations, Texas Tech. You've put yourself in that conversation. BYU, pat on the head. You guys are not good enough. And Kyle Whittingham sees that.
Of course he does. And as a competitor, why would you not want to go to Michigan? Like, why would you not? It's the top of the top. What do you think? And I know you don't have much time, but what do you think of my tier one? Like, so my tier one again for Blue Bloods at the top of college football, like the programs that are like the most elite, most historic, the best coaching jobs I can think of, I would say are Ohio State, Michigan, Texas, Alabama, and LSU. How'd I do?
I would put Notre Dame in there.
I knew you. I got Notre Dame on my second tier, tier two.
I would also put, if they had a halfway decent coach, I would put USC in there. Like if Kyle Whittingham was at USC, or if Kalani Sitake was at USC, or if Kirby Smart was at USC, hell, if Matt Campbell was at USC, That would be a tier 1 job. Somehow Lincoln Riley has turned it into a soft program.
I know.
But
It's bizarre.
yeah, USC should be because they have money. They have a backyard full of elite athletes.
Yeah.
So USC probably should be there. But
Yeah. Wait, I lost you here for a second. Are you still there?
oh yeah, little freeze there.
There
I
you
got to go, but I want to tell you one thing.
Okay.
I think two things are true. I think two truths can exist at the same time here. I do think that Kyle Whittingham wants what's best for the program that he's leaving, but I also think he wants what's best for himself.
Of course.
Much like I want you to have as many listeners and as much money and a great house and all that, but not to the detriment of my own success and my own family. And so I think that's the reality that we live in with Kyle Whittingham. I think that people are expecting him to be this altruistic saint that just leaves, meat on the bone at Utah to do Morgan Scalley a favor, and that's not realistic. And it's not what you would do if you were in his position.
No, I wouldn't.
So there's no reason for people to expect that from Kyle Whittingham, and it doesn't affect his legacy at all, in my opinion. You gave 21 great years.
I would say, if anything, it almost makes his personal legacy even greater. He just got hired at Michigan. I mean, it shows he's almost bigger than Utah. I don't mean that condescendingly towards Utah. Michigan is bigger than Utah, and they wanted Whittingham.
Yeah,
so,
you're dead right.
So it's pretty cool. So I know you got to go. One last question. How good do you think Texas Tech will do in the college football playoffs?
I think they're going to be great. I mean, defense travels, physicality travels. They've got a quality run game. And Baron Morton's at least serviceable as a quarterback. He knows not to make mistakes. I would be incredibly disappointed if they don't win at least a game. And I think they got a chance of being in that Final Four. Can they win a national championship? That's going to be dependent on the health of Jacob Rodriguez and the rest of that defense. But I think Texas Tech's going to represent the Big 12 well. Ultimately, I don't think it's going to elevate the status of the conference in the eyes of the nation, but I think that they'll be good.
Yeah. That was the next question, I guess, and I will let you go, but I just wondered, if they get beat bad by Oregon, is it just a nail in the coffin that the Big 12 is a one-bid league from here on out until something drastic changes?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, I unfortunately agree, but hopefully we can dig our way out of there, But, well, dude, this is great. Thank you very much. We'll let you run.